Hey Gary, how you doing?
Well,
Good. Thanks for doing this with me. I met you at the gym probably a few months. Oh, I've seen you for the past year or so. And like at that gym setting, you see someone a lot. So you feel like you know them, but then you really don't. You just see them pretty regularly. And so, met you at the gym. I don't think we ever talked in the sauna, but we definitely talked in the locker room, and I enjoyed that.
right.
And so I asked if you would have a long form conversation with me,
Mhm.
and you agreed to do that. And so today I use the term oral biography.
Mhm.
And so I would like to kind of get to know you and talk about your life from zero to now, and then go into maybe different things you've learned along the way and then things like that. Does that sound good? All right. So let's talk about Gary 0 to 10.
Gary 0 to 10.
Yeah.
I guess Gary, starting at just after 0, was born in England.
Okay. Oh, England.
Yeah. And my parents, we're talking, let's see, well, I was born in 54, so
hmm So are they British?
they're British, born and raised. And in the 50s, and actually really even through the 60s into the 70s, a lot of people emigrated from the UK, and the two favorite spots were Canada and Australia.
Interesting. What was the reason for that?
And, post World War II, Britain was still kind of a tough place to live. Career opportunities were not good. And I think what drove my father more than anything is at the time, England was still a very class-oriented country.
So if you came from wealth, you would keep the wealth. If you didn't, limited opportunity.
Exactly. And he decided opportunities were better in Canada. And actually, he was right.
So what opportunity was he pursuing? Just opportunity? Was there a particular opportunity, just the idea of opportunity?
I think it was the idea he could do.
Okay.
Now, he was working in the insurance industry in the UK. And when he came to Canada, that's where he looked for work and was hired. I mean, Canada at the time was a country that really needed immigrants. Didn't have the workers, didn't have the population.
Interesting. So they moved to Canada. How old were you in that?
I was 3.
3. Okay.
So really, I'm a Canadian. There's still family in England.
Yeah.
I ended up going back to England to go to university.
Yeah. The one thing, so I have family members that live in Canada, and I know Canada still has some association to the Queen, but it's very loose, right? And I don't really know what that association is.
The Queen is still the head of state.
Yeah.
But
what does that even mean, though? Like,
I mean,
does she have actual power over people?
no.
Right. So it's like, what?
No power. But when the Canadian Parliament passes a law, they are acting as her Parliament in Canada, just the same way the one in London acts as her Parliament.
That's
If
interesting.
she's a titular head, and supposedly, and both accurately, she's above politics, or he is.
Yeah.
I'm saying she because I've Queen Elizabeth or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I maybe one day I'll look into that more, but what power does she have?
There are as I understand it, I'm no expert,
Yeah.
but there could be very rare circumstances where the monarch would be asked to exercise a power.
Yeah.
The classic is if there's essentially a hung parliament, the monarch actually asks someone to form a government. And this is never happened.
Yeah, some black swan event.
But if no single party can pull together enough seats to have even a tiny majority,
Yeah.
the monarch can select someone as prime minister and have he or she.
And she has power in England and Canada to assist.
Yes. In fact, in Canada, there's an official called the Governor General who represents the monarch in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as I said, it's hard to imagine a circumstance where, the king would ever really be required to exercise any kind of power.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how she still has association to Canada. I'm assuming they have to pay her some fee or tax. No?
No, they don't. Yeah, I mean, Canada obviously is a Commonwealth country.
Yeah.
And how long it will last, I don't know. In Canada, people, I think, don't care enough to make it an issue.
Yeah.
I think Australia is a little bit more tense about it, and Australia talks about becoming a republic.
Yeah.
It's not much of an issue in Canada.
Maybe if the Queen ever exerted power that they didn't like, then they'd be like, okay,
That's the
because he doesn't exert any power
thing.
over the people.
I think if the monarch were ever put in a position where they have to do something, that may be the end of the monarchy in Canada.
Yeah.
But as long as it's all symbolic.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Like whenever they get married, it's a big thing when the royals are funeral, but it's like, why do all those people care? They don't seem to hold any political power. Anyway, that was a little sideshow. So you lived in Canada. How long did you grow up in Canada, essentially?
Yeah, I grew up in Canada. All my elementary, high school education with Canada. I had my first year at college.
Because you don't, I didn't know you were Canadian because you don't seem to have that accent.
It's been too long. I've been in the U.S. since 80, 81.
But even still, I feel like Canadians usually, today I was at the gym. I was talking to a dude, 57 years old. Instantly knew he had an accent, Canadian.
See,
Because you don't say A, they have the certain incantations. But yeah, I didn't know you're Canadian. It's interesting. So you definitely don't have an English accent. Definitely don't have maybe very slight, but I couldn't tell, Canadian accent. So yeah, let's talk about what was life like growing up in Canada.
I have to say it was an easy life.
Mm-hmm.
I had the classic middle class upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
We always had a nice place to live.
What province?
When we first moved, we moved to Toronto, Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was quite young, my father's company moved him around a bit. So we went from Toronto, we went to Ottawa, from Ottawa to Calgary, from Calgary back to Toronto.
Mm.
But that was really all before I was, I'd say, 13.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved to Vancouver and stayed there. So I kind of consider Vancouver hometown.
Yeah. I remember in middle school, we had to learn the 50 states of America. And then Canada was only 13 provinces. I couldn't recite them all now, but at the time it was much easier to recite 13 provinces and capitals than the 50 states.
Right.
So in your childhood, you play sports, anything like that, or what did you do?
I did. My main sport was competitive swimming.
Oh, interesting.
Now, that sport was done largely outside of school.
Mm.
I
thought you were going to say outside. I was like, it's pretty cold in the winter.
Real cold in Canada.
Yeah.
Because of that, my social life revolved around the swim team.
Yeah.
As a kid. So actually, unlike many people, I didn't have a lot of social connections to school.
Mm-hmm.
It was all the swim team.
Right.
Now, at school, I did some school sport.
So let me ask you this.
Mhm.
Did you enjoy swimming or did your parents push you into it and then you enjoyed it?
You know, I think I enjoyed the social aspects of the swimming more than the actual swimming.
Hmm.
Having said that, yeah, my father was the one who put me into swimming initially.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly why swimming, I don't know. He was a good swimmer, and
Mhm.
he himself swam competitively in England.
So when your dad's really good at something and does it at a high level,
Yeah,
Tiger Woods' kid plays golf. He doesn't play any other sport.
true. But with my father, actually, swimming was not his primary sport.
Oh,
Soccer was his primary sport. And he actually played professionally for a couple of years in England.
interesting.
So he was a very good athlete. In addition to swimming and soccer, he was a very good track guy, track and field, high jump. He was really a good athlete.
What was his height?
He's not big. He's about 5'10". I don't think he ever weighed more than about 165 pounds. But for some reason, he decided, swimming is right for Gary.
Did you have a lot of respect for your dad, knowing that he was able to do all those things?
Yeah, I did.
Did he ever swim with you when you would swim, or did he ever go out there and train with you?
Not much, no.
Busy working?
No, he was pretty good at leaving all the coaching to the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And as a swimmer, I saw other swimmers, other kids, whose parents were a royal pain in the you-know-what.
Yeah.
No, my father wasn't like that.
So he because I think something I see parents struggle with today is, I don't want to force little Johnny into something. And it's like, well, as a parent, that's kind of your job, is to put him in uncomfortable positions. Because if they're never put in uncomfortable positions, then they become an adult. Life is uncomfortable.
Sure.
And if they've never had to deal with it as a child, then you kind of set your child up for failure because life is uncomfortable. But then I've also seen it where if the parents pushes too hard for a child to do something, then the child resents the parent. Yeah. And then the older they get, they completely resent and then maybe fracture the relationship altogether. So I think there's a line there, right? And yes, challenge the child. Mm-hmm. But if it isn't working, maybe there's a point where you let go.
No question about it. The other thing, looking back on it, that I think I learned, although I didn't realize I was learning it at the time.
Right. Most lessons are hard to learn in the trial itself. Yeah. It's not till afterwards you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And what it was there was a value in competing, but it wasn't necessary to win. There were times when I swam well, times when I didn't swim as well. I won races, I lost races.
So how did you handle the wins and the losses? Did you take it personal, or?
I think as a kid you do, but because I swam for a number of years, thankfully that wore off. And I think I did accept the fact that, and it's so trite, you win some and you lose some.
Yeah.
And let's not get too wound up about either.
Right. Yeah. And so then you realize, as long as you put in the training, you put in the maximum effort, then the result will be the result, knowing that you put the effort into it.
Yeah, and you're not going to live and die by the result.
Yeah.
And there were other attributes to being in that environment. As I said, I formed some very close friendships, had some absolutely wonderful trips. Our team, we went to Europe twice.
Wow. So you were pretty good.
Well,
what was your favorite stroke?
I was a breaststroker. Which
one thing I could never learn was the butterfly. It's very difficult.
Yeah, the butterfly is different. I was a breaststroker, and I was a decent swimmer.
Yeah. So did you know that that age, like you'll never be the best?
I think by the time I was in my mid-teens, call it 14, 15, I realized that I was never going to be a great swimmer, never going to be the best. And that was okay in the sense that there were a lot of other fun things going on.
Yeah.
I could qualify for big meets like the Canadian Nationals or, some of the big meets in the U.S. and compete in them, knowing full well I was not going to.
So what do you think? I have my theory, but what do you think separates the good from the great? Because I would say based on what you're telling me, you were a really good swimmer. I'll tell you what I think the theory is, but what do you think separates the good and the great?
The good and the great. You know what? I think it's a little hard to generalize. I would say, obviously, the great do have an ability to work at a level that maybe most of us don't. On the other hand, there were plenty of good swimmers who
could become great,
worked hard, but never could quite get that step up. There are people, I think, that have innate talent.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And the true greats do. If you see, these people, multiple gold medalists at the Olympics, world record holders, now there's something they're born with.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. There's some of it's genetics, right? So if you take someone, so I have 4 kids, and as I talk to my kids, they're into basketball. And we kind of watch for basketball and different players. And you can see there's players out there that are just gifted, right?
Exactly.
But they're lazy. And so it's hard to find someone that's gifted and works hard.
Right.
Because then they're the ones that will really, really excel. But then there's players out there that have to work really hard just to get to that level. But most likely, you do hear those stories of really hard workers that win. But if you have the genetics and the hard work, then
that's right.
Then but it's interesting that you kind of realized that in your middle school. I realized that so I was always into sports, but I remember I used to run a lot. And when I was younger, in my late teens, early 20s, marathon was a thing I was interested in. And I saw how much effort and work I'd have to go to get a certain time.
Right.
High school, it's 5Ks and stuff like that. And so this guy I'd met about my age, he trained for 2 weeks and did a marathon in under 3:10 in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would have to train 2 years, and maybe I could hope to get 3:30.
Yeah.
He qualified for Boston in 2 weeks.
Right.
So that's when I was like, okay, yeah, sometimes hard work isn't enough. Sometimes there is just that genetical freak that people have. Like I know Lance Armstrong gets a lot of flack for all of the cheating and everything, but ultimately he also just had really good genetics. And when they studied his lung capacity, it was twice the average human being. So when I actually started coming across, because I was always a really hard worker when it came to sports, but then you would just meet someone and you're like, no matter what I do, I will never be at that level.
Yeah.
And that can be frustrating, or you accept it.
And you try to enjoy other aspects of the sport. I mean, when on the team I swam for in Vancouver, we had a number of Canadian Olympians on the team, and our head coach actually did for several Olympics coach the Canadian team, men's team, women's team.
So you were used to being around.
He was a top coach, and but a friend of mine on the team, Bruce Robertson, great guy, kind of easygoing character, and he came into swimming when he was about I think he was like 12, 13.
It's a little older in the
A
game.
little bit older in the game. And the reason he came into swimming is his doctor said it'd be good for your asthma. Long story short, in 1972, Bruce was a silver medalist in mountain fly in Munich.
Wow.
The only guy who beat him was Mark Spitz.
That was a U.S. guy, right?
Yeah, well, Spitz was sort of a star of the time, multiple Olympic medals, just, again.
Did you ever try out for the trials?
I swam the Canadian Nationals 2 to 3 times.
Oh, wow.
But I could never place in the top 3 in my event.
Yeah.
I could get a 7th or an 8, but I could.
You get the participation award. It's so crazy because you still put in all the work. You try just as much as the other guy. Did that frustrate you, or you just enjoyed it?
Again, a time low. When I was really young, 10, 11, 12, it bugged me if things weren't going real well, if I wasn't winning. But as I said, the older I got, the more I saw, the more I realized that, no, I'm not cut out to be exceptional.
Yeah.
I can be good, I can be solid, but I'm never going to.
And it's all relative, because if you went and swam with the average person, you would destroy them.
Yeah. But you see, some people just did have that innate talent. And you watch them, you watch the stroke. They just had an amazing ability.
Well, you'll have to, off camera, you have to take my kids out sometime and teach them how to. We try that. We try that a few times. My oldest knows how not to drown, so that's good. I think as long as your kid doesn't know how to not drown, that's a big thing. But yeah, other kids, they definitely need to learn how to swim better. So that's really interesting. So that dominated a lot of your early childhood, was swimming.
It did. It wasn't the swimming per se. It was the whole life.
Yes. Because you have practice a lot and meets and weekends.
In the summer, twice a day. And even as you got older, even in the winter, we'd do a 6 a.m. workout, and then you'd do, like a 5 p.m. workout.
Yeah.
So
it's a lot of swimming.
Yeah.
So you probably eat a lot too.
Yeah. Well, you did eat a lot, and with me, didn't put on an ounce.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Interesting life, and obviously your parents enjoyed it. And you have siblings then?
I have a sister.
And was she into swimming at all?
She swam, but she didn't do it as intensely, perhaps, as I did. She wasn't quite as involved in it as I was.
So
I think she got dragged to the pool, and
yeah, because everyone else does it. So you did that. I'm assuming you did that in high school.
Through high school, into the first year of college, and then I did my first year of university at UBC in Vancouver, and just wasn't enjoying it particularly. That there was very little meaning to it.
Yeah, when you do something for that long, after a while, that tends to happen a lot. I see.
It was
a lot of times parents will try to they want their kid to get a scholarship in a sport, and then the kid goes to the first year of college, and is like, "Yeah, I'm over this."
Right. The first year of college as well it seemed to me to be something I was doing because I had to do it. And I wasn't terribly motivated or interested or excited about any of the subjects I was looking at. I was doing them, one of those wonderful Bachelor of Arts degrees.
Yeah, just
you take
athletes just get random degrees.
So I did a little research and found out that in England, all programs are undergraduate. Law, medicine. So I ended up applying and getting admitted to University of Leeds, their law school. So instead of doing a BA, I did a Bachelor of Law.
Interesting. So so I actually want to drill down in this time period. They're saying a lot of young people now, and maybe it's every generation, I don't know, that is 18 to 25. It can be difficult being a young adult. Would you say that's just a general principle of life? Or to me, it seems like even more young people now are even more confused about adulthood. I don't know. But I'm curious, what was your thought process? You knew you didn't like something. Rather than quitting on life, you did some research, which I think is a valuable lesson. If you don't like something, then go learn. Go see what else is out there.
Look at Archie.
So I like that. I think that's a powerful lesson. What made you pick law?
I think that I was motivated. I desired to be, have some degree of success in a career. And
Question. When you were a young adult, 18 to 25,
right,
did you have dreams and aspirations to be like a multimillionaire?
no, not really. Not a multimillionaire as such. But I did have an aspiration of being comfortable, let's put it that way, and having a secure situation that did generate a pretty good amount of income. And maybe it's because, I'm a little bit small c conservative by nature. I'm not entrepreneurial. I never have been entrepreneurial. So the professions was a good option for me. Law, medicine, something like that. Truth be told, law was the second choice.
Oh.
My passion is flying airplanes. And, but I found out very young that there was no way I could ever be a professional pilot in Canada.
When you say professional, like airline or in the military?
Airline pilot.
And why is that?
Because I had poor
eyesight.
My eyesight was poor. And they didn't have LASIK back then. You couldn't correct vision, obviously. So I had to look for something else. And law was almost a natural. My father at that time was a senior executive at an insurance company, dealt all the time with lawyers. And a number of his friends were lawyers, and I met them. Second, I was always pretty good at school. Grades were always very strong. The one thing I've never had any trouble doing was taking an exam.
Yeah, some people are really good at it. Some people...
And I am.
Yeah.
I am good at that. So in a way, it was, I can't be a pilot, so, may as well be a lawyer. I never did have any great passion for the law. Was it interesting? Some of the subjects were very interesting. I can't say that I didn't enjoy some of that law school experience.
Yeah, I want to pause on that thought that you just said. I wasn't passionate about the law. I think a lot of young people today, they think you have to go find your passion. The reality is, you may not know what your passion is because you haven't done anything long enough to know what your passion is.
Yeah.
Right? So like, when you're a child, swimming for you was the main part of your life. It came to its natural conclusion. So then you had to replace it with something else. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that because they're like, well, what am I supposed to do with my life? Or I don't know what I'm interested in. I don't know what I'm good at. The reality is you're not good at anything.
True.
The reality is you haven't lived enough to know. So then sometimes I think you have a powerful story of, hey, I had this, I didn't give up, so I did this. Was it my most favorite thing in the world? No. And I think young people need to hear that, is just because it's not your most favorite thing, it's still worth trying. Maybe once you try that, whatever it is, then you can decide whether or not you want to continue pursuing it, versus just so many people just get stuck in life and don't do anything. And that's not helpful. I think you have to just continue to move forward. So that sounds like kind of what you did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I really believe that if you, as long as you're pursuing something that is worthwhile, and something where you're learning, and you're learning how to think. I don't care if it's law or if it's philosophy or if it's psychology or if it's math. They're all very worthwhile. And that's, of course, eventually what I found out with the law.
So I'm assuming you got accepted into the school in England.
I went to England. I got a law degree in England.
So how long? College 3 years? Is college a little different over there, right?
3 years.
3 years, because you did a year in Canada and transferred over to...
So I did
So you became an official lawyer?
I have a law degree.
Okay.
And then the plan was always to go back to Vancouver because
So did you pick up an accent when you were over there?
I may have picked up a slight accent after 3 years.
Yeah.
Especially considering that one of the things I did at Leeds was I did moot court. And I actually was part of the team, Leeds University used to go and do sort of mock hearing other universities.
So you probably got pretty good at debating and actually having logical conversations, something that we find hard to do in society today.
It is a bit difficult.
Try to have a conversation with someone today that maybe believes something slightly different than you, and they're like...
I know. It shuts down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I enjoyed it. Went back to Canada, the plan being, well, back up half step, that's not quite accurate. I was going to go back to Vancouver because of the people I knew and the people my father knew in particular. I actually was offered a position at quite a large law firm in Vancouver. And I did a summer with them between my second and third year.
Summer internship?
Summer internship.
You get paid? Free?
Yeah. And it was great. I mean, this was kind of for Vancouver, this was a big time law firm. It's one of the largest firms in the city, which was great. And the plan was always to go back to them and just be a lawyer in Vancouver.
Did you know, so the general, again, I'm not a lawyer, but from books of things I've read, it's a lot of hours being a lawyer.
Yeah.
And you kind of knew that was a lifestyle?
You know what? At the time, it wasn't as severe as
it is now. Now it's like 40 hours is like part-time.
Yeah. I mean, then 45 to 50 hours. Now you're getting, 70 hours.
70 and billable hours. Let's see if we can get to 90. So it wasn't as crazy as
it was.
I don't know how bad it is now, but I know there was a phase where it was real bad.
It's bad now, and yes, it became very bad after I went into the profession. However, at the time also, it was not as bad in Canada as it was in the U.S. As usual, Canada is always a mild version of the U.S.
Yeah.
But what actually happened is instead of going back to Vancouver, I decided that it might be interesting to do a master's in law, an LLM. And long story short, I was accepted at Berkeley.
So a couple questions before we continue your story. One, how did you pay for this? How did you pay for your first year of college and then your last 3 years of college? Were you going to school?
You're talking about how do I pay for
the college and all that stuff?
Yeah. University? There was virtually nothing to pay for.
Because now when kids go to school, there's a huge financial
credit
cost to it.
It's insane.
Yeah.
One thing I have to be grateful for. When I went to law school in England, the most I ever paid in tuition was around $300.
Yeah, and today that maybe gets you one textbook.
It was free. It was virtually free. Even for people coming in.
That's crazy. Tuition was, so it's just room and board.
It was room and board.
And how did you cover that? Did you have a part-time job?
I had a job in the summer, and my father supplemented.
Okay. Because that's something that older generations tell the generation now, go to college, right? It's the good thing to do. It's the right thing to do. But what they fail to realize is there's a huge financial cost to go to college now. So you tell this individual to go to college today, and then they come out with $100,000 in debt, where you didn't have that. It's so the times are different. We can debate and how valid school is today. That's a whole nother conversation. But at least from a cost wise, you didn't come out of college with burdened with debt, which now you're.
I had no doubt.
Yeah.
And also, what I would tell people today as well is, you may need to get a little more creative. I mean, here, maybe you want to do the 2-year.
Yeah, get your associates. Yeah.
And then move on. The other thing I tell them is if you might want to take a tour around the world to see what may work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Still, the Canadian universities are much, much less expensive than the U.S. schools, even for foreign students.
Wow.
And there are some very strong universities in Canada. I mean, University of British Columbia is terrific. University of Toronto, McGill in Montreal. They're as good as pretty much any of the good schools.
Well, here's what's interesting today in 2023. All that knowledge is now available online for free. You can take Harvard courses for free now. Well, not the actual course to get a credit, but you can audit. So it's like, if you want to know the information in 2023, you can go find it somewhere. You can Wikipedia, YouTube. I get it. There's the whole other concept of it, but like, if you want the raw knowledge of whatever,
yes,
you can actually find it today online.
The question is, how do you get hired?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But
that's a whole.
If you want to know the actual data, you can go find it today online.
That's right.
So that's interesting.
I was fortunate. When I went to Berkeley, it was on scholarship. Because again, they handed.
That's where you got your master's? Oh, I had another question. When your swimming career died or ended, did you find a different physical sport? Because that's like a part of your identity that ended.
Yeah.
For some people, that can get depressing because they're like, especially like if you want to be a professional player and you get injured and they're not able to do it anymore, right, they can go into a depression state. I don't think that was your case.
It wasn't my case at all.
For you ended, but you didn't replace that time with it.
Replace it with a sport. Because as I said at the end there, for the last few years of my swimming, I was swimming and I was doing decently.
Mm-hmm.
But really the most important thing to me was the team, the group, the trip.
Camaraderie.
Yeah, so I didn't have a need to replace swimming with any particular sport. So no, I didn't.
Interesting.
I think one thing the swimming did is ingrain in me the importance and need to exercise.
Okay, so did you pick up exercising after that?
I tried. I mean, in college, things you get absorbed in other things, but yes, through the years, I've always tried to work out at least a handful of times a week.
Okay, so that instilled that.
And it did instill that, I think, yeah.
Was there a big push? So there's a big push today for longevity, health, and fitness. Was that a thing back then?
I don't remember being much.
Because that's a pretty big thing now.
Yeah.
There's a guy, Brian Johnson, and other people, Peter Attia. I'm an athlete of life. And that's the thing they're pushing now. I'm an athlete of life. Brian Johnson's whole thing is don't die. Or Peter Attia, he's more just like, hey, let's look at the science. If you do these things, it won't guarantee an outcome, but you'll have a higher likelihood of less disease, less problems.
Sure.
And so I more or less try to subscribe to that kind of lifestyle where I'm not necessarily competing for anything. I guess if I'm competing for anything is to live longer and a higher quality of life.
Yeah.
So that wasn't really pushed or preached back then.
Not anywhere near the same extent. I think people would throw out, oh, you gotta stay in shape, and that, but no, I think that also, even separate from exercise, now we're really focused on diet. What do you eat? How much do you eat?
And that wasn't really a thing back then.
Not to the same, nowhere near the same.
Yeah, we also didn't have obesity back then like you do now.
I think that's probably true.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, back then, I mean, people really still believe that, meat and potatoes the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how over time things change and focuses change.
Yeah.
Humanity today, we can spend a lot of time thinking about how to live optimally.
Mm-hmm.
Where humanity prior to the past 100 years was just trying to survive. Right? It was all about survival. But now in 2023, I don't have to spend that much time and energy thinking about food and shelter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because of that, we're 100, now it's more like 150 years ago. Most of your time, 90% of your time was, where am I going to get food? How do I have shelter? But now that's such a small part of my time. So as a society, now we can think about how to live the most optimal life, right? How much should you do this? How much should you do that? And sometimes you can get too caught up into it because you're just like, sometimes you just have to live, right? Their whole thing now is like, what's your morning routine? If you're a high entrepreneur. So you have some entrepreneur that's like, got to do your cold plunge, got to do this, got to do all that. And then other ones are like, don't do any of that. Just go work, But there's a balance there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're privileged, especially in America, to sit around thinking about how to live optimally.
Sure.
Which I guess it's a blessing and a curse that we can sit around thinking about.
Worrying yourself.
Yeah, worrying ourselves to death. Yeah, as I think about health and all that, it's stress is a factor. So if you're stressed about your health and your exercise, that's going to kill you more than all the other things you can do. So, all right. So, you applied for master's in the U.S. So another question I had: when you were living in Canada,
mm-hmm.
Did you ever have a desire to live in America? Was that a thing?
No, particular.
And another question I have is, what was the Canadian dream at the time? We all hear the American dream, which for a long time was buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
What's the Canadian dream?
No, I think it was. I do. Canada. I think there's a lot of attributes in Canada that are similar to the U.S. I mean, Canada's a developed.
They're like cousins.
Yeah. I mean, there are differences.
Yeah, for sure.
Different conversation. But sure, you had a good job. You had a nice house. You had it. That was all the same.
Mm-hmm. But so there wasn't that strong push or desire to, I want to live in America, or you had a good life in Canada and you're happy with it?
Yes, and I think that's true of the overwhelming majority of Canadians. They certainly don't need to move to the U.S. to have a good life.
Yeah.
Do
you think this statistic is true? They say 90% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the border.
Oh, it does. Population in Canada.
Yeah.
That's exactly true. If you look at all the major Canadian cities.
And that's more because of weather, right?
Yeah.
Further north you get, it's just cold.
It is. If you go too far north, it's really cold.
Yeah, you end up at the North Pole.
Yeah, that's right. And, it makes sense. I mean, there's a massive amount of trade between the U.S. and Canada.
Yeah.
Which often gets forgotten about in the U.S. because the U.S. is talking about Mexico. U.S. is
the NAFTA.
China.
Yeah.
And whatnot. Actually, there's a huge amount of trade between the U.S. and Canada.
Well, I think the reason why it doesn't get talked about is they talk about this a lot in human psychology. It's when things are going good, we don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So why is Boeing in the news? Well, how many flights occur with no problems? Millions. Millions of flights every year, no problems.
Mm-hmm.
But then the one time there is, and I'm not saying it's not an issue, now we're talking about it, right? So we don't talk about things when they're going well. And that's part of the reason I started this podcast was, let's talk about, like, rather than highlighting celebrities and really extreme high net worth people, maybe you are a billionaire, I don't know. Like, let's highlight the everyday average man. Like, it's not boring. That's most of our reality is going to be, that's why they're called the 1%. It's because they're only the 1%, but I think the other 99% can have a pretty good life.
Sure.
And so that's why I one of the reasons I created this was I listen to a lot of smart people, interesting people, high net worth people. And yes, it's interesting. So I listened to Elon Musk's biography. Super interesting dude. Multi, 300 bill at one point. But at the end of the day, it's not really relatable to me. Are there things I picked up from the book, like first principles? There were some interesting concepts I learned. One concept I learned from the book was he would rather over delete, and then so he would rather overcorrect than undercorrect. So if, like, the whole Twitter thing, he's like, yeah, I'm gonna get rid of 75% of the people, knowing that was too much. And so he does that with Tesla. He does that with all these companies. Is he'd rather over delete and then have to come back and be like, actually, you need to add those things back in. So, because sometimes for us, because he has to make decisions at such a level that are just crazy. And then for us as a just basic human, we get paralyzed with the decision. So you feel like, okay, if this guy can make those kind of crazy decisions, he just has basic formulas that he follows. Is he extremely intelligent? Yes. But in every industry that he's in, he has these principles. So it's like, okay, maybe I can adopt some of those principles in my life where I don't have to get paralyzed by just silly decisions that can be solved really quickly. So all to say, yes, it's interesting, but am I going to ever be worth $300 billion someday? No. Is it more likely for people who watch this to have a similar lifestyle to you? I think that's more achievable. And so that's the story I want to celebrate, is the person that went and lived life, made certain decisions that led to wherever they are today. And I think that's the American dream, right? So,
the Canadian dream.
And the Canadian dream.
The other thing, though,
is it different than the British dream? What's their dream?
Is it?
Because
I think that Britain was evolving towards more of a U.S. style dream.
Are you a U.S. citizen now?
No.
You're still Canadian?
I'm a Canadian, a dual British Canadian. I'm a permanent resident of the U.S. And, but I think that Britain did have to break through that class system.
Yeah.
Which
I think it still exists.
Nowhere near to the same extent. So yeah. I'd say no, it doesn't really.
Well, maybe it's more subtle. It's still there.
There are some, but honestly, no. It's not like it was in the 50s and 30s.
So let me ask you this. You lived in different countries, obviously been American for a while now, but you've had exposure to other countries. I'm not saying America is the greatest country in the world, but what separates America from all the other countries? Why do people want to come to America versus other countries?
Well, I think first of all, I think the people that come, that there are categories and they are different. Obviously, there are people who come because their country is an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
And they're coming just to be able to live. They're not coming to have a big house in Beverly Hills. They're coming to have shelter and food.
Yeah.
Other people that may be coming from more developed countries, I think that those people also see that maybe the best of what goes on in their work lives, is here. And it's here because the U.S. is the world's largest economy.
Mm-hmm.
And, there is no doubt that America has the best of the best in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that attracts some people that could comfortably stay at their own countries.
Mm-hmm. So would you say, like, I think one reason people come here is for opportunity. The land, it's not the land of guaranteed success. It's the land of opportunity.
Yeah.
But could you also have that opportunity in Canada and England?
I think to a large extent, you could.
For the listener that's in another country, you don't have to come to America.
No doubt about it.
You should go somewhere else.
You could. I think you can. There are plenty of opportunities in a country like Canada.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to be a great surgeon, you can be a great surgeon in Canada. And you want to have a successful law practice, you could certainly do that in Canada.
Yeah. So if you're willing to work hard,
yeah,
you can obtain some success over there.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, so no, I did not have any particular desire to move from Canada to the U.S. What happened with me was, and this is another thing I've learned, that random things happen that are, it's not that they're right or wrong, they just happen, and you're presented with an opportunity. In my case, it was doing the master's degree at Berkeley. By doing the
How did that opportunity come up?
There are programs, certain scholarship programs available for, in my case, law graduates from England to come and do a master's degree in the U.S. in law.
Mm-hmm.
I applied and was accepted into one of those programs, which provided a scholarship to do an LLM and Cal. And I thought, well, that's great. I mean, Berkeley's, great reputation, great school, and indeed, nothing wrong with the Bay Area. That
good weather, yeah.
So I came to do that. That qualification then opened up the ability to go to work as a lawyer in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the decision that I would apply to some big U.S. law firms,
mm-hmm.
almost to see what happened, because I always had the option of going back to Vancouver and joining a Vancouver firm.
So once you got into the law program, I think the picture I have is primarily from movies and TV shows. It's going in front of a judge, talking in court. But a lot of law is not that. Was that ever a fantasy for you to do that? So that was never a thing.
I never really, what I wanted to be as a lawyer, as I was going through law schools, I thought, well, it'd be fun to have an international practice. Now, I wasn't quite sure what that meant, other than my clients were operating in various countries around the world.
It's a complex problem.
Help them with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the master's at Berkeley was terrific. I had an English law degree, a master's from a good U.S. law school.
Mm-hmm.
And as that opened up the ability to apply not just to Canadian law firms, or for that matter, to UK law firms, but also to American law firms. And I got an offer from a big LA firm. So, and I thought, well, LA's warmer than Vancouver.
Yeah.
So I ended up taking that.
Okay. So yeah, I didn't even know you were a lawyer. You told me you worked in financing aircraft, so I was like,
which is what I do now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's we'll eventually get to what you do now, but this is very interesting. That's why I like having this conversation, because I don't know any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so got your MBA, or it's not MBA, LLM.
Master's.
So how long did you work at this firm in LA? And what did you specialize in?
I spent about 3 years at the LA firm, and then I spent another couple of years at a big firm in San Francisco.
At this time, did you get married, meet someone?
Well, I met someone at the firm in LA, and eventually we did get married.
Okay.
But
And what was her name?
and it's Valerie,
Valerie?
and she was actually going to college,
Mm-hmm.
and she was working in the law library at the firm I was with. There's another big change. I mean, back then, big law firms often had 2 floors of a skyscraper that was all library.
Yeah.
And
And that's all digital now.
nothing online, no computers. But at any rate, say I worked for about 3 years in LA.
So what age is this?
How old? Late 20s into very early 30s.
How old were you when you got married?
Was I? I'd have to do the math.
But sometime in that time frame, you got married.
Exactly. 29, 30, in around there.
Mm-hmm. Was it love at first sight? You dated, you met each other?
We dated. I mean, I was very attracted. It was an attraction at first sight.
Yeah.
But yeah, we dated. And
You know what they say today? The way people meet each other today is through a dating app. It's like 90%. Where that wasn't a thing back then.
Right.
Where you just met people
exactly.
so how did you remember how you met?
Yeah, I mean, she was working part-time at the law firm I was working at in LA. So,
yeah, you meet people. If you're in your hanging, like anyone that's single out there and you're in your 20s, if you're hanging out in your mom's basement,
it's not going to work.
you're not going to meet anyone. So you kind of have to get out there and interact with people. And now people get around that by, well, I'll still hang out in my mom's basement and I'll just use a phone app.
Museum.
It's like,
And then you read what people say about themselves.
yeah,
And
that's
look
how
at
you
the
get to know
pictures
someone.
people posted themselves.
Yeah.
And you're obviously not necessarily getting.
You're getting 1% of that person.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you practiced law. Were you enjoying it? What kind of law did you?
I was always in the corporate. These law firms, both of them, both in LA and San Francisco, were large firms. And they had various departments, corporate litigation, tax,
I'm certain the hours getting a little crazy then.
Yeah, the hours were getting crazy, more and more.
What was the hourly rate? You remember what your hourly rate was back then?
What we bill, But
what do you, if you don't mind sharing, I'm curious, do you remember kind of your annual salary back then?
oh yeah, I remember annual salaries, and they mean nothing now.
Right.
My starting salary in Los Angeles
This is to help people get perspective.
was like $28,000 a year, which all my
What year?
parents couldn't believe
Because they thought it was a lot.
because it was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were the days when people were getting paid $1,000, $1,200 a month in their first jobs.
Yeah.
So, no, it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
That was actually a lot of money. Now, the big New York firms are
It's 200 minimum.
over $200,000 a year as a starting salary.
Yeah. But you're also working 70, 90 hours a week.
And you know something? I mean, we were at the beginning of that. There was a lot of pressure being put on billable hours. Law firms were growing. And it was known they would hire, a big firm like the one I was with would hire at the time, let's say 28 people, knowing full well that at the end of 5 years, only 8 or 9 of them would still be there.
Yeah, because they just work you to death. Because they know high attrition, people are going to
That's right.
quit.
And they know people.
Yeah.
A lot of people did. And those that didn't, they'd fire some of them, deciding they just weren't going to make the cut.
Right. So late 20s now, maybe early 30s, not really enjoying it.
30s? No, not at all. I was bored silly most of the time. There's nothing worse than working as a young associate in a big law firm. It's awful.
Yeah, you're just bottom of the totem pole.
You are. Then the work is just
What kind of work is it?
mind-numbing.
What kind of work is
In
it?
my case, going through massive contracts, trying to understand them, catch errors, make changes. As in the litigation group, and I did do some litigation work at the firm in LA because they did like to rotate you through departments. It was usually discovery in cases. The firm I was with in LA was IBM's West Coast lawyers. And IBM was in the middle of a big antitrust lawsuit brought by the government,
Yeah.
DOJ. And you'd have to go through literally hundreds of thousands of documents.
That's so crazy.
And that's what and remember,
And you did this all with bad eyesight.
well,
Oh, it wasn't good with you.
I could see close
I know.
something. I mean, I'm not saying this because I was an odd duck anyway. Let's face it, this guy with an English law degree and most of my peer group were kids coming out of top U.S. law schools,
Yeah.
Harvard.
Why didn't they hire you? Because you had a different perspective?
I think so. I think I was a bit of a curiosity. And okay, I had a degree from Berkeley, not a real degree, but I had a degree from Berkeley. But all those other guys and gals were, people who had clawed their way into the top 10 law schools in the country. Were smart. They were smart kids.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're stuck in a windowless room going through thousands of documents in this, IBM antitrust case.
Would you say lawyers have high IQ or above average? Because you're having to look at a lot of raw data
My
and
guess.
analyze it.
I mean, I think that people who come out of top law schools are people who are academically well above average.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you're not going to get into Harvard or Stanford or for that matter, Berkeley, the law schools,
Mm-hmm.
without
What's that big course, that big test you have to take? LSAT?
else.
Did you have to take that?
No, you see, I didn't.
So that they hadn't started that.
No, they had.
Oh.
But I got into Berkeley as a foreign law student doing a master's degree. So I didn't have to take the LSAT to get into Berkeley.
Mm.
Everyone doing the JD, the first law degree in the U.S., they'd already got bachelor's degrees in this, that, and the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
They then take the LSAT as part of their application to get to law school.
Mm.
I totally bypassed all of that. I didn't have to do that.
Interesting. All I know from my knowledge of lawyer and all that stuff is there was a TV show called Suits.
Mhm.
I don't know if did you ever watch that?
Yeah, I'll see.
Oh, you did? You enjoyed it?
Yeah.
So that's my whole knowledge of. They make it sound like it's super fun, super high, but it's like
It's all.
it's awful. Yeah. So that was a fun TV show. And
So,
I mean, what's funny? It's called Suits. There's nothing like you wouldn't even from the name wouldn't even know it's about law.
to be fair, I mean, a lot of those people were actually passionately interested in the law.
Mm-hmm.
So they were willing to put up with an awful lot of stuff to maybe eventually become
A partner, because that's when you make real money.
well, you make a lot of money, but also
What's
you
the
get to run a case. It's more interesting than sitting in the room going through all the documents.
incentive to become partner? Do you get a portion of the profits from the overall business?
By and large, yes. The classic law firm, things are changing again. They're becoming more and more like corporations.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was there, and still to a pretty reasonable degree, they are partnerships. So yes, you get a cut if you're a partner.
So for someone like me that knows nothing about this corporate side of the world, what's the corporate ladder structure as a lawyer? So you get hired on,
You get
you're bottom of nothing. You're
how old is associate?
okay. And generally, how long you have to do that before you get to the next level?
Typically it was about 7 years from associate to partner.
So you just grind.
Yeah, you grind. Young associate, senior associate, partner. Things, again, have changed somewhat. Some law firms now are much longer to a full partnership.
Yeah.
Some law firms even have different.
Yeah, there's different things within.
Some partners now aren't actually equity partners.
Mm-hmm.
And there are law firms, a lot of law firms have people they call counsel of counsel.
Mm-hmm.
They're neither partners nor associates, but they're useful to the firm because of particular knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So they're almost consultants in a way.
Yeah.
But they practice in an area that they're very familiar with. They get paid very high salaries. Don't get me wrong. These are not, they get paid well.
Right.
But they're not equity partners in the firm.
Mm.
But when I was starting at the big firms, the firm I was with typically was partnership decision in 7 years.
All right. So you're married. Now you're in your early 30s, not enjoying life. What'd you do next?
Well, and this is where another lesson I think can be learned. I had a very good education, and I'd been taught how to think. And
so
what I realized...
How does one think?
Like a lawyer.
Okay.
You have to have all the facts, or as many as you can get. You have to accept what is true and what is not true. And you then work your way to a decision on something using all of that. One of the things that drives me nuts today is everybody's got an opinion, but a lot of those opinions aren't worth anything because they're not based on the truth. This is what you see time and time again. Yeah, you have a right to an opinion, but frankly, your opinion is stupid.
It's not founded on facts. So
Yeah.
let's go into this a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think it's fun. But when you change the facts today, right? We're changing what is truth today.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you argue with someone or debate with someone when you can't even decide on what the facts are?
I think you can't.
Right. When they're saying math is now racist, and you're just like, it's hard to come to the table. It's hard to negotiate on something when one party is willing to potentially compromise or trying to understand, but when the other party is just like,
yeah,
hey, we want to do whatever we want to do, and these facts are changing, and you're just like,
I have an opinion, and my opinion is right, and even though I don't have any facts to back it up,
yeah,
I have an opinion, and I'm not moving.
Because emotions are powerful,
Yeah.
right? Or I think being a lawyer, you want to be passionate, ideally.
It's one of the things you do learn, that emotions, a good trial lawyer.
Right. They know how to pull the heartstrings.
Jury.
Yeah, that's a whole different.
Going to.
That's what you learn in suits is pulling of the emotional heartstrings.
Yeah. But so much of legal practice has nothing to do with trying a case in front of a jury.
Yeah.
You have to recognize and accept what facts are. And
I don't know this, but in order to be a judge, you have to be a lawyer at some point, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So for some people, they will actually want to become a judge sometimes, so they got to put in the...
Some people, there are a few people who have an ambition, being a judge.
Yeah. I didn't realize, but Judge Judy's still around.
Also, even in this country, of course, being a judge, first of all, it depends on what kind of judge you are. I mean, judges on the state and local levels are often elected.
Mm-hmm.
Now, federal judges are appointed.
Right.
That's a different animal.
Did you ever watch the TV show Billions?
Yes.
So I've learned a lot, however true it is, from the law and hedge funds and all other people. So that was an interesting TV show.
No, it is. It is.
All right.
But I was saying, what you said, okay,
How do you think?
life in a law firm. I really went back to what pushes my buttons. What am I really interested in? What do I enjoy? And it was aviation. I learned to fly when I was 18. I got my license.
Oh, you did. You just couldn't fly anyone
I
up.
couldn't fly professionally. Oh, I could. I could fly people privately. I just couldn't.
How'd you pay for that? Because to do that now would cost a lot of money.
Again, I had summer job, and back then,
It didn't cost that much.
do it. You can manage with it with a summer job.
Yeah, not today.
Not today, but anyway, I decided, well, I'm a lawyer, but hey, there's a lot of aviation corporations that have legal departments.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I went in-house, as they say, left the law firm, took an in-house.
Was it a pay cut?
No, it wasn't actually. At the time, it was pretty much a lateral move.
Mm-hmm.
Now, knowing full well that if I ever became a partner in a big law firm, I'd earn a lot more than I would as an in-house lawyer.
Yeah, but it's not always about the money.
Yeah. So I went in-house at aviation.
If you don't mind, what was that salary like when you made that transition?
You know what?
I'm not going to ask what you make today, but
I think
back
it was
then.
like late upper 30s, 38,000, 40,000 a year, something like that. But this was a lot of years ago.
Yeah.
And that was well above average
For sure.
at the time. So,
Lawyers in general make more money than...
Yeah. So it wasn't that we were suffering.
So was that still in California?
Went back. I left the firm in San Francisco, which I'd gone to from LA thinking that San Francisco would just be more fun, realizing that, you know what, one law firm's just like another.
Mm-hmm.
So went back down to LA and went in-house with an aviation company in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, one of the best jobs I've ever had.
So how long did you do that for?
I was there, good 8 years.
So what did you actually do there?
Well,
For someone that's interested in law.
that was so much fun because at that company, the company had several divisions doing different things.
Is that company still around?
It's now part of Honeywell.
Oh, and Honeywell, interesting.
It was a company.
I just know them as the thermostat company.
They're big in aviation.
Interesting.
And it was a company that, as I said, had various divisions, almost all of them in the aviation world. It was a company that made jet engines for business jets.
Mm-hmm.
It actually was, at the time, the largest turbocharger manufacturer in the world. The turbocharging business provided turbochargers to piston engine aircraft, also to the automotive industry.
Mm.
But I got handed a division. I became the lawyer to a division which was the most interesting in the whole company.
Yeah.
It was called Air Research Aviation Company.
Mm-hmm.
They ran what's called fixed-based operations across the country where business jets would come in. And they also did heavy maintenance on business jets.
Mm-hmm.
And they did all the interiors and avionics on business jets, modifications.
Mm-hmm.
That was job number one. Job number two.
So what did you do, though, in that?
I provided legal counsel to them. I helped them negotiate contracts, write contracts. I also, and
you enjoyed it?
I enjoyed it.
Did you have to work a lot of hours?
No.
So like a 9 to 5?
And the other thing that I did was I dealt with the FAA.
Yeah, that can be
That
fun.
company was governed by, it had to have FAA license and conform to FAA regulations.
Did you see the latest news from the FAA?
About Boeing?
No. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. So in honor of DEI and ESG, which we don't have to get into, they now want to hire people that are severely not intelligent. And you're like, that's a policy?
Yeah.
Like back then, when you were working back then, you hire people on merit, right? The best law firms are going to hire the smartest people.
Sure.
Now we are going to make a policy that deliberately wants to hire people that are severely not intelligent.
Right.
They use a different term, but it's like, and what do you think is the outcome of that?
Yeah.
And that's where, when you say learn how to think, let's think through that. Whether you're on the left or the right, I don't really care. Let's think about that policy. I think I want someone that's intelligent, that's, I'm sure there's more than, like, generally when I think people think about FAA, they think about the air controllers or coordinating the flights, but I know there's a lot more. There's other jobs that they do.
Well, the FAA certifies aircraft.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of FAA regulations.
Correct.
Governing.
Yes, they govern. They're all over Elon. He loves them. He's the most regulated man in the world.
That's one thing I did. And so, and that is a very legal activity. But the other thing I did at the company, it was called Garrett Corporation. They decided that because I had a pilot's license and an instrument rating and all that good stuff, why don't you be the in-house lawyer that governs all our litigation?
So
and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So to be good at that, are you reading new stuff? How do you counsel? How are you making yourself a better lawyer? Like, what information are you reading?
Well, first of all, you have to keep up with any regulatory or statutory changes.
So you're just reading laws all day?
No, you're following the update.
Yeah.
The other thing you're doing is reading the new cases that are coming out in your
potential lawsuits and stuff.
There are cases are reported. So I would make sure that I would read the aviation cases on a monthly basis, the new ones coming out. What are the courts saying? How are they interpreting the laws?
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing that. But I was also in charge of all the litigation for the company, the great majority of which was aircraft accidents.
Yeah.
Because we had so many components on aircraft, ranging from small Cessnas on up to the big jets, we got sued fairly often if any incidents or accidents happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 8 or 9 years of aircraft accident litigation exposure, which, as a guy who's fascinated by airplanes and aviation and flying, I loved.
Yeah.
It was just interesting stuff.
Has space ever interested you?
Not to the same extent. I am interested.
Like, would you ever go work for SpaceX if they were like, hey, we want a lawyer? Because at that point, you would have to do it because it's passionate.
Yeah. And the answer is no. No, I wouldn't. I don't want to go back to a 50, 60, 70-hour week.
Yeah, we'll get to what you do now. But so that seemed like you enjoyed that.
I enjoyed that job immensely.
Did you have people that worked under you, lawyers under you, or were you the main?
At that time, no.
So you were like one lawyer?
I was one. My boss was the vice president general counsel of the company.
Mm-hmm.
I reported to him. But he largely left me alone to take care of my division and the accident stuff.
Here's something I find interesting. A lot of CEOs are ex-lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
Like Merck and a lot of these companies, because you're like, you don't even know anything about what your company actually does. But you do because you're the general counsel. But when you think of Merck, you think of like pharmaceuticals and stuff like that.
Cool.
And it's like, why did you put a lawyer there?
As a lawyer, especially as a lawyer in-house, you often get to know an awful lot more about a company.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with all of its divisions. You're dealing with all of its disciplines
Mm-hmm.
as a lawyer. So you often know more about the company overall
Yeah.
than any, let's say, engineer does.
Yeah.
From
You see the big picture. Does that ever interest you to become a CEO of a company?
Not really. The thing that I was interested in was eventually becoming the general counsel of a company
Mm-hmm.
and sort of running the legal.
Did you ever do that?
Yes, I've been general counsel to a few different companies.
Interesting.
So,
All right, so let's progress. 30s, it seems like you really enjoyed what you're doing, working as...
30s and yeah, right.
Did you ever have kids?
Yeah, one daughter.
One daughter?
One daughter.
How old's your daughter now?
She is 36.
So close to me. So you had a kid in there, enjoying it. What was 40s like?
By and large, I was having a much more enjoyable time, certainly at work, than I did when I was with law firms.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, though, about the aviation industry, which I quickly learned, is very volatile. And, for example, at Garrett, loved the job, but eventually it was bought, and the world changed completely in terms of the legal development.
Mm-hmm. So your circumstances can change, so
Without
be ready to pivot. Yeah, be ready to pivot if need be. You can sit there and complain or pivot.
accept it. Try not to be too upset about it.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. I moved from Garrett and actually moved into the area that I'm still doing now, which is I moved to an aircraft leasing company that was based in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, again, a whole new piece of the aviation industry that I had had no exposure to. I now learned all about aircraft leasing and finance.
So a lesson I'm getting from your story, you became a lawyer, wasn't necessarily something you're passionate about, but you did it. You went and did the thing, and rather than quitting altogether and doing something completely different, you said, okay, what, based off the skills I have now, how can I go find something that maybe I enjoy? Where I think a lot of people would have been like, I don't like it, I hate this, completely just delete that part of my life, go start something else. So I like that lesson. You went, took the degree, but then we were able to combine it with something you're passionate about, which is aviation. Within aviation, you enjoyed it, but one thing you kind of alluded to earlier is got to constantly learning and progressing. And so even within aviation, I think where a lot of people get bored with their job is they don't get enough change. They just do that same thing day in and day out, and then 30 years go by and they hate their life even more. So for you, you would ever so often, you still were a lawyer, still worked in aviation, but maybe change the particular field that you were focused on.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
No, that's right. And I think that, I admit I felt somewhat forced to do it when Garrett was acquired. And as I said, the new regime in the general counsel of the company that acquired us was just nowhere near as much fun and was nowhere near as much flexible as the general counsel of Garrett was. But yeah, it then made me think, well, let's look for another company. And I ended up finding an aircraft leasing company in San Francisco. And it opened up a whole new part of the industry. I mean, at Garrett, it was a manufacturer of aviation products, and it was a maintenance company, which was great. I learned all about that. The leasing company was in the finance world in aviation.
So with that, it's again, I don't know much about it, but it's yours. You're leasing it out to high net worth people or companies.
At that time, the company in San Francisco I joined owned the aircraft. They leased them to airlines.
Okay. Oh, okay. So these were bigger planes then, probably.
These were airliners.
Okay, so commercial.
The other thing that was interesting, always has been
Is that still a thing now, or do airlines actually own?
huge.
So airlines don't generally own.
No, airlines, the time I started, the airlines owned the great majority of their aircraft and leased a few. Slowly but surely, it swung through the years. Some airlines own none. That airline is usually a smaller airline, not the strongest.
So like Alaska Airlines probably owns some of their planes.
The big guys do, but even the big guys now are approaching 50-50.
Interesting. So we don't have to go too far into this, but I do find this interesting. So let's say a plane that the door flew off.
Yeah.
Who owned that plane?
I don't know.
So, but if Boeing didn't own the plane and it was leased,
Well, Boeing doesn't know.
or not Boeing, Alaska Airlines, if they don't own that plane, yeah, this gets really interesting to think through. And as a lawyer, you have to think through all these things. So it's like, if it's being leased, is it the party who owns it? Or I'm sure there's paperwork that says, now that we give the plane to you, you're responsible for maintenance. Because no one wants to be responsible for the
typical aircraft operating lease makes the lessee, the airline, responsible for all the maintenance.
Yeah.
And the airlines are fine with that.
Why does the airline not want to own it? Like, what does the airline get out of not owning it?
Two major reasons. One, money.
Yeah.
If you're going to own an aircraft, you either have to pay cash or at least you have to put a big down payment down and finance it.
Yeah, how much does a plane cost? Yeah. Typical.
Well, that particular airplane, a MAX 9.
The one that had the door issue?
It's, $75 million airplane. Now, the likes of Alaska United that buy big fleets, they can get substantial discounts. But you're still talking an airplane that's a $50-60 million machine.
Yeah.
Now, airlines want to own some, but they can't possibly own their entire.
They don't have enough financial.
It's just not
so
good use.
To break it down, like I'm a 2-year-old or maybe a 10-year-old, let's talk the leasing.
Mm-hmm.
So company A, are they known names that own these planes, or are they names of?
Well, known very well to someone in the industry.
But someone that's not?
No.
So what's the name? That Alaska would
the biggest
rent from.
leasing company in the world is called AerCap. AER.
Okay.
AAP.
So AerCap goes to Boeing, says, Boeing, we want to buy planes.
AerCap, Air Lease, the big guys, yes. They actually go directly to Boeing or Airbus, and they will buy.
Are they doing it in partnership with Alaska?
Not necessarily. Those guys will place large orders, and they're really speculating on their ability to lease. Okay.
So they're not even working with Alaska on that initial purchase.
There's a second level, though, where, yes, they'll work with the airline. Alaska places a large order. Alaska may then go to AerCap and say, hey, guys, we've just ordered 60 airplanes. Could you take 5 or 10 of them off our hand and lease them back to us?
Interesting. Yeah, because I know there's a lot of custom ordering going on.
Yeah.
So here's my dummy version of what happened with the door, and you probably know more about it than I do. I was talking to a guy, maybe you shouldn't have told me this information, but at the gym, who works at Boeing. So insider knowledge. The way he explained it to me was the fuselage was built by Spirit. Not Spirit Airlines, but Spirit the company.
Spirit and
Yes. And so they're most likely ultimately responsible for that door and the bolts, possibly. And so the what I thought was super interesting was the door that fell off or flew off, inside it was plugged. So that was treated like it was a normal seat. So whoever was sitting there, here's what's crazy. There was people that were supposed to be sitting there, but their flights were delayed. So they never made it to the flight. So it's like, whatever God you believe in, like something happened where if those, like generally if you miss your flight, you're annoyed. That's the one time you're like, thank whoever you want. I didn't make it to that flight. So that's crazy, right? But, so bolts were loose, but whoever was sitting there haven't even known that there was a door there because it was it was mad oversight. Yeah, it was plugged. So that was super interesting to hear. So now I'm curious, what the legal ramifications are going to be from all this. Because are they going to go back to Spirit? Because I'm assuming Boeing is supposed to make sure that like, hey, they should be double, triple checking everything that's going on, right? Everything should be essentially triple checked. Redundancy.
Indeed. Well, I mean, the FAA is sort of focused on it.
Yeah. But here's the thing about the FAA. Here's the thing about the FAA, because I've known, obviously Boeing's a big thing around here. Another guy that worked for Boeing 30 plus years, he's like, there's no way, if you have one FAA guy, there's no way he can possibly touch everything at the plane. So he's just more or less, looks good.
Not even, a lot of the time, not even Boeing.
Sure. That's
what the FAA has to do is designate the authority.
Oh. They're going to, so they're going to be like, hey, Boeing, did you check it? And Boeing's going to be like, yeah, we checked it. But then we, the public, think FAA guy is actually checking it. And it's like, it's impossible because there's so many different layers. And then so like that whole thing would have been sealed up. And so what I thought was interesting was that plane had issues before that flight.
It had some pressurization.
Yeah. And so they were like, okay, let's just do small flights. So I wonder how often things happen that we don't know about, where they're like,
obviously they happen, and a lot more.
Yeah, because now
we don't know of.
Yeah,
but it'll be interesting to see what that particular figure.
Does this story interest you? Are you tracking it all?
Yes,
just for curiosity.
Well, I watch it. One, because I'm interested, and two, as someone who works for an aircraft finance company, the answers to the questions can actually have an effect on the value of an aircraft. And as an aircraft financier, we rely in part on the value of the aircraft to secure the loan.
Yeah.
Well, it
does affect you. So let's go back. We kind of jumped ahead, but let's actually go back to your story was interesting.
Yeah.
Alaska goes to Boeing. Hey, we want 60 planes. We don't actually have all the money.
Yeah.
Let's go to you. Can you help us finance?
Aircraft leasing companies, and I want to buy them. Well, they could.
Are they on the same contract together? So let's say...
the Alaska Boeing contract?
So let's say, go back to your story. We ordered 60 planes. We don't have the finances for 10 of them.
Yeah.
We go to you. Are all three people signing that document? Or do you then be like, hey, remember that agreement you worked with Alaska? Give us 10 of that.
In most cases, if, for example, Alaska's wants to, they want to own some of their planes, they can come to someone like us or other banks and say, we want you to...
So you're essentially a bank. A bank for airplanes.
Bank.
Yeah.
We are. So we loan money to the airline to help them.
And they're the only people you loan money to?
No. We own a lot of money to the aircraft leasing companies because they also buy airplanes and they don't pay cash.
Meaning you only loan money to aviation?
Only aviation.
You're not doing like car loans?
No, only aviation.
Where'd your company get the initial capital?
Big life insurance company.
So are they owned by a life insurance company?
We're not. We're not owned by them. They have a small, relatively small interest. They use us to originate loans in the aircraft space. They provide the capital for the loans,
The insurance company,
the insurance company.
because they get so much money. I hear they're the most they bring in so much money. It's outrageous.
I mean, we also are talking to a couple of other entities, one or two of which I think almost certainly will come in, and they're actually private equity firms. Same thing. They've got tons of money. They're looking for places to put it.
So what's the interest rate? What's the going interest rate on plane loans right now?
Depend.
Well, it's not a loan though, right? It's a lease.
No, with us, it's a loan.
Okay.
With an AirCap would buy an airplane.
Okay.
They may use us to finance the airplane. They then lease to the airline. Okay. So,
I think it's complicated.
but in that case, it's the leasing company that's the aircraft owner.
Mm-hmm.
We may provide financing. So we have a lien on the aircraft to secure our loan.
Right.
The airline is simply leasing the airplane and operating it.
Yeah.
I'm a leasing company.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the industry, it's the airlines who take all responsibility for operational costs, including maintenance.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting world for sure. And so how long have you been in that world?
I've been I was in that world for many years. I then came here.
Here's where?
Here being the Seattle area.
Okay.
I was offered a job to be vice president general counsel of a big heavy maintenance company, Payne Field. And I did that for about 4 or 5 years.
Mm.
That's why we're sitting here in Mill Creek, because it's so close to Payne Field.
Yeah.
I then had the opportunity to return, if you like, to a good friend of mine and someone who's been very active in the aircraft finance leasing field for a number of years. He was starting a company, the one I'm with now.
Okay.
So I kind of helped him set it up.
So the company he starts does what?
I guess,
because you don't own the money. You don't have the
we don't own the money. We're the ones who originate the loans. We do all the loan documentation.
So you're a third-party processor. You're the go-between the bank and the airline?
Well, I suppose you could look at it that way, but we do all the work in originating the loan, whether it's with an airline or whether it's with a leasing company. We find the business.
But why do they need you? Why doesn't the airline go straight to the bank?
Well, first of all, it's not a bank.
Oh, yeah.
It's an insurance company, right? A life insurance company or a private equity company.
So they have multiple different people they can go get money from.
They being the airline?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, they can go to banks. They can go to the, we're sort of we're a non-bank type lender. We're not a bank, but we loan money like a...
So you do loan money?
Oh, yeah. When I say we loan money, we set everything up. We do all the documentation. We deal with all the negotiations. What the life insurance company does is they give us the money.
Yeah.
That's what they do. Why don't these guys go directly to them? Because they're going to say, we're a life insurance company. You want to buy a life insurance policy? What do we know about?
Interesting. So they don't want to have it in-house.
They don't.
It's not worth the hassle.
And frankly, most people in our industry obviously don't want to work in-house with an insurance company, and the insurance company doesn't really have the volume to justify a big in-house group.
So how big is your company?
We're, what are we now? 22 people.
It's not that large,
Not huge.
but like, or so, can you tell me some of who your clients are? Like, do you work with Alaska and Delta?
We work with any of
If they come to you,
we sometimes we
do you have like a sales guy?
them loan originators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure,
And they will contact airlines, they'll contact lease.
so they probably get nice commission. Like, imagine getting,
Well,
what's their commission like?
they don't get a commission.
Oh, so what incentivizes them?
They get paid well, they get bonuses, and they also have a piece of the company.
Oh, okay.
But the trick is, and why you can't just snap your fingers and sort of set it up yourself in-house, everyone in our company, with the exception of the youngest, have had years in the industry. So, for example, our guys can pick up the phone and call a very senior guy at AirCap or at Air Lease. They can pick up the phone and call the CFO at Alaska or Delta. They have connections at quite high levels.
Yeah.
And although there's tons of money involved, it's actually, it's a relatively small industry.
Yeah. So you don't have a lot of,
Knows everyone.
you don't have a lot of competitors?
We have competitors, but we know our competitors well. We know that with,
So how do you guys make money?
well, we get our fair share of the loans.
So charging a fee for the loan or on the interest?
First of all, it's almost like a loan fee. In that respect, it's a little like, a mortgage,
Yeah.
where there may be,
You're just adding a couple more zeros to it.
there's a fee. In addition to the interest itself, there may be a 1% fee up front. That's what we get.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get management fees from the insurance company or from the private equity firm. We do have to manage the loans. They don't. They've provided the money, but they're not managing the loans.
Mm.
So if there's a default problem, we gotta
How often do people default?
haven't yet.
Yeah.
We've never.
It's not like, I mean, if you're handing out loans like that,
Yeah, but you do get defaults. I mean, it'll happen, and
and you know it's coming generally, probably, right? It's not like a surprise.
you do, and the way it's handled is very case specific.
Yeah.
I mean, some borrowers, if they're running into trouble, some of them the smart ones, frankly, I say, want to try to work it out
Right.
up front. They'll cooperate with you. Do you, help them keep the airplane, or do you say, and they may say this, look, we can't, we want to return the airplane to you. But I'm saying it's fairly rare.
You know who owns an airplane that was interesting? Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess another diversify is, I don't know if I'm assuming he loans. I read this in his book, his biography, and he was talking to this guy. How do I diversify? I have stocks, real estate. He's like, go buy a plane. And I'm not sure exactly how that works.
Well,
I'm talking about, he actually owns a commercial plane.
yeah,
So I don't know if he's the financer.
that to have one individual is very rare. But having said that, another source of money that may buy planes and lease them, or may want to finance an aircraft and lease it, are family offices.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are involved in providing care.
Yeah, maybe it's through a family office or something, but yeah, he's like, I own blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, that's random.
Through a family office. You see that. There are various sources of money. I mean, there are things called Japanese operating leases.
Mm.
And what that's all about is there's a lot of family companies in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Surprisingly, because all you hear about are the big, massive Japanese corporations. But there's a lot of companies in Japan owned by families. And they will sometimes get involved in buying an aircraft and leasing it to an airline, because if it's done in the correct way, they can take depreciation on the aircraft in Japan.
This helps with taxes.
They shelter a lot of their money using a Japanese operating lease.
You may know this fact, but Japan, their businesses last for hundreds of years,
Mm-hmm.
where it's not really a thing here in America. We haven't been around long enough. And so I learned that from someone, where they really think long term with all their decisions, not 10 years, not 20 years, but when I die year, what is the impact of my decision? Where in America, we're so quarterly. We're thinking about what's going to happen in 4 months, 3 months. And it's like, if only we could think a little bit longer. We're so motivated by the stock price. We're over there in Japan, they're like, that's silly. We're going to make a decision today that's going to benefit us in 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. Or how many U.S.-based companies think like that? Especially if they're publicly owned, you can't.
You can't. It's probably being public.
Yeah.
Question about.
Or at least the private companies, I'm learning more about this side, is private companies are more 5 to 10 year outlook, which is still relatively short compared to in Japan. They're thinking about 100 years time frame.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting.
No, private companies here at least have somewhat of a longer, and they can do things now which, if they were public, would hurt the stock price.
Right.
They're looking out beyond